Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short, soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. And I am so happy to have Teri Rizvi with us. And a little bit about Teri. She's the founder and director of the Erma Bombeck Writers Workshop at the University of Dayton, where she serves as executive director of strategic communications. She is the author of One Heart with Courage, Essays and Stories, and the co-editor of Laugh Out Loud, 40 Women Humorists Celebrate Then and Now, Before We Forget, and Sisters Bonded by Love and Laughter, both published in conjunction with the Erma Bombeck Writers Workshop. Her essay, Living in the Moment, appeared in Fast, Fierce Women, Woodhull Press 2022. Her essays and feature stories have appeared in USA Today, the Christian Science Monitor, The Guardian in London, University of Dayton Magazine, and the Dayton Daily News, among other print and online media. And she'll tell us later where we can find her, and I'll also have that in the show notes. But welcome, Teri.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So we met several years ago when I was actually there in person at one of the Erma Bombeck conferences. I think maybe it was 2016 or 2018. It's every 2 years in person.
It's every 2 years in person. It was before the pandemic, so I think it might have been 2018.
2018. And then you will kindly ask me to speak for your virtual conference during the pandemic. And I talked about how not to get ghosted by editors when you're pitching editors, which was especially important during the pandemic because editors were dealing with what we were all dealing with in society. And so you talk a lot about your own personal journey in your book that I have right here, One Heart with Courage. And it was really fascinating to me to learn a little bit more about you in terms of that you are part of a multicultural family, as I am. My husband's South African, and that your son went to NYU, which is where I teach. And so it's really interesting because there you are in the Midwest, part of a multicultural family, dealing with one of the warmest and most congenial writers' conferences I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. I'd like to know, like, how you take your own personal experience and imbue that into your professional life.
Well, my personal experience, I started out as a journalist. I went to journalism school at Ohio University, and I started writing personal essays there as part of I was the managing editor of the Ohio University Post, which was a daily student newspaper. And we had like a take two column that each of us would write. And I was interested at that point in kind of exploring my own voice. And so I started doing that. Although I was a journalist and wrote feature stories and news stories and edited other people's work and that sort of thing. But I kind of got interested then. And I think, with a personal essay, as you know, you can take a small everyday moment and make it universal. I mean, Erma did that in a humorous kind of a way. I'm not a humor writer per se, but I know that you've read some of my book, and I think that you can see that these are small, little everyday moments. And they have a universal kind of experience to them. And I initially wrote the book really as kind of a love letter for my two boys. I wanted them to have my writing. And the way it all kind of developed was I run this workshop. It started in 2000. Like everyone else who comes to this workshop, after being there a couple of days, you're inspired and you think, okay, I'm going to do this. You're encouraged, you're inspired. You can write. That's our mantra. So I had written personal essays all throughout the years through my career at the University of Dayton. that would be published in the magazine, or when we would go back to Pakistan, my husband's originally from there, I'd write op-ed pieces, and then later some more personal reflections. So I had a bulk of writing that I wanted to possibly publish one day, really just for my boys. Then the pandemic hit, and it became like, for many people, well, if not now, when am I going to do this? And so I had a little extra time. I've always worked from home mostly, but I had some time, and I worked with an editor, and I just pulled it together and wrote some new pieces, which I think made it more timely. There's some COVID kind of pieces in there, piece about my son's virtual graduation from NYU, not what we were expecting, and things like that. But what I discovered was what I thought was going to be just a highly personal book for my family has appealed to so many people, because I think you can hit on what is universal in everything, whether it's, life and death, writing about, a parent's death or a friend's death, or, as a woman trying to balance your career. There's a whole section in there about that losing battle with your personal life or the writing life. I mean, there are many, many essays in there about the Erma Bombeck Writers Workshop, or sports as a metaphor because my children played sports, or courage, just the whole aspect of trying to live a courageous life.
Yeah, I really liked how you structured it, because you had a section on motherhood, a section on courage, on faith, and you ended with faith. How did you decide to structure it? Like, what was the thought process behind that? Because I always try to help my listeners and viewers learn different, whether they're writing their essays or their articles or their books, different tips that can help them.
Well, it was helpful for me to have an editor. So I had a friend from journalism school. Actually, we had lost touch, but then we came together over Zoom every couple of weeks during the pandemic. She was a freelance writer and editor. I knew that some of her work had dried up. I asked her, I said, and she had not read anything that I've written since college. So I asked her, I said, would you edit this for me? And actually that it worked on two levels. One, it spurred me to finish it. And two, she helped me structure it, because you could have structured it chronologically, because there's an essay that goes back 40 years. So, I could have done it that way, but I don't think it would have been as effective as doing it by theme. So we did add the dates for each of the essays at the end of each chapter, or at the end of each essay. But I think the theme approach was really the best way to do it. So I started to look at my writing in that sense. Okay, what kind of pieces would fit into the motherhood bucket? What kind of pieces would fit into faith? What sort of new pieces do I need to write to make this book more contemporary and relevant? And that's kind of how we structured it. And then I had a lot more stuff that I had, but many of the pieces, the early pieces when we went to Pakistan, were more op-ed in nature. And I thought the personal, that's too political, too op-edish, for, I think, an audience that just wants to pick up and read essays that you hope would elevate the human spirit. I mean, that's what I've tried to do with my writing.
I love that. Elevate is a word I use a lot. And I think it's a really important word, because it's not just the technical, it's the spiritual.
Exactly.
It's the effect that you want to have on the reader.
It is.
And so that's beautiful. And I liked your technique of also adding in the dates, so I could read it and go, oh, okay, well, she's writing about a 5-year-old, and obviously
he just graduated from NYU. So
right. So that was very helpful. And then in terms of the structure, it probably made it so much easier to do it thematically, because then you could just say, okay, this goes here, this goes there. I have 20 essays for this section and only 5 here. Maybe I take some out of here, or
maybe take some out of there. Maybe I write something new for this section. And that's exactly how it worked. And having an editor, and I really push that for people, no matter how professional a writer you are, how long you've been writing, everyone needs an editor. You need a fresh eye. You need someone to say, yeah, that lead works, or that ending, that walk-off works or doesn't work, or what do you mean in this section? Just someone who is not in your head, but is reading it, as any reader would read your work.
And, it's so interesting to me also that you talked very specifically about the pivots you made in your career and where you started, and then you working at the university, and you had the opportunity that you created for yourself, really. You had kind of a moment where you said, wait, I want to change things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the workshop, which was a moment in time back in 2000, I was leading the public relations office. So I was the director, and I had all these writers working with me and for me. And then I had a public relations committee of alumni in marketing, editing, journalism fields from around the country. I was looking for a project for them to do. What can we put our hands around and do something specific rather than just asking them for advice about work that our office was doing? How can I involve them in something? And our alumni relations office was looking for big ideas, something that would bring some national visibility to the university. And I knew that Bill Bombeck was going to be donating Erma's papers to the University of Dayton. I thought it would be, I could see, because my background is in journalism, and I could see that as having national appeal as a story, actually. And then because we're all writers in the office and I had this committee, I thought, why don't we just put a little writer's workshop around this idea? And then Bill Bombeck knew so many people. Bill Keene, who was the cartoonist for Family Circus, was his neighbor in Arizona. So he brought him in, and Art Buchwald, and Liz Carpenter, who stumped with Erma for the ERA going around the country. She was the press secretary for Lady Bird Johnson. And then her agent, her syndicator, brought all these really interesting people together. And we laughed for 3 days, and we had the keynote talks, we had the workshops. And then after we were finished, my folks in my office said, well, why don't we do it again? I said, no, we can't do it again. This is not our day job. If we want to do it again, let's do it in 2 years. So then we did it again in 2 years. Phil Donahue came in. We opened up his speech to the public. We had 2,000 people there for his talk. And we realized we had stumbled on something kind of magical. And so I had a writer in my office who is a humor writer, Tim Beat, and he got very interested in the idea. And he started this e-newsletter, which is really how we started to market it nationally. And after the first year, we never did a brochure, and we were able, by word of mouth and by the e-newsletter, and then later on by social media, develop a real sense of an Erma community who helps us sell the workshop. And that's how we've been able to build on the popularity and make it into a national event. But it was a moment. It was one moment in time that, hey, we're going to do this or not. And then when I stepped into a part-time role about 8 or 9 years ago, I was talking to the president at that time. I was thinking about actually retiring. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I want to do some of my own writing. I want to read some books. I want to walk on the beach. He goes, okay, then what are you going to do? So then we structured a job, which was great, where I worked directly with the president. And then I said, I want to continue to do this workshop. So then it became actually an official part of my job description. And then I began to use that extra time to kind of raise money. And we're building on the endowment and that sort of thing. So we've done all kinds of different projects, this Humorous in Residence contest that we do. We work with a local library and the Erma Bombeck writing competition. We're starting to do some virtual programming, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You actually worked directly in some cases with Erma, who sat, right? She was on a board, or
she was on our board of trustees, and I was very young. I was in my 20s, maybe, or 30. And we were doing a fundraising video, and we wanted her to do a testimonial for us as one of our most famous graduates. So she walked out of this board meeting, and there I am with a videographer, and she sat down and did this little story about how her English professor, encouraged her, supported her, told her those 3 magical words you can write, and how it just launched her career, and how she believed him. And then she said, well, he was marrying his brother. I mean, the University of Dayton is a Catholic university. And she thought, well, do I believe him? She said, no, he'd have to be on his knees repenting the rest of his life if he weren't telling me the truth. And so that's how, that encouragement, that little bit of encouragement, which is really what the workshop is about. And you've been there, it is very, very supportive. There's nothing elitist about the workshop. It's just writers helping other writers.
Teri, I love that you said what Erma's teacher had told her, you can write, because it's so inspirational. And really, it is about the way that you set up the Erma Bombeck Writers Conferences. They're so inspirational and so warm and friendly. And like you said, there's no elitism. People can sit with different people. Everybody is very friendly at all the meals and in the hallways. And I loved that experience. And I think my first time I did a little bit of a publishing speed dating thing where I sat in a room and some people came and asked questions about getting published. And that was a fun experience. I don't know if you're still doing those, but that was a fun part of the conference for me as well. So, okay, what I have noticed, and I speak at a lot of conferences and I've been to a lot of conferences, is that there is a real fan base to Ermites, as they call them. And there are people who are repeat customers over and over because your conference is giving them something that they are hard pressed to find elsewhere. And I would really love for you to talk a little bit about the upcoming conference and also about what you feel that is and how you feel that's imbued into every aspect of the conference.
Well, I think it's the Erma spirit. I mean, I don't know if you can bottle it or not, but I think our attendees bottle it every time they come. And you see that synergy that plays off of them talking to the faculty members or the keynoters and to each other and finding kind of their own tribe. I mean, that's kind of what it is. And so the workshop has been built almost solely on word of mouth. I think people come, they feel inspired, they tell other people, they come. So every time we'll probably have at least half of the attendees have been there before. And then we'll come up and then we'll have new people as well. So it just kind of breeds itself in a way. And it's been magical.
It's almost like an event moment, like an appointment moment when the registration becomes available. Yes. The announcement comes out and people are, wherever they are, they're stopping and they're going on their website or they're going on their phone because why? Tell us why that happens so quickly.
Well, it has sold out fairly quickly in the past. We're coming out of COVID, so it may not sell out as quickly as it's done, but I do believe it will sell out again for the spring. But I think it's because of just that spirit, and people want, and we have a private attendee Facebook page, and people are involved in that. And I think in between the workshop, there's that camaraderie that develops and that support for each other's writings. People share their writing on that Facebook page and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think that's why it's sort of it is a moment. It's not, I mean, one person said, hey, it's like getting Rolling Stone tickets, or, it's, which I kind of love that. That people feel that, hey, we got to get involved quickly if we want to go to the conference. And we have sold out and we've had waiting lists, and I'm just always feel very grateful for that and never take that for granted, because, every single time we have to kind of reinvent what we're doing and try to bring in, new people and the right mix of people and deliver on what I would call the Erma promise. And so that's kind of why I think it has that momentum. As far as the upcoming workshop, it's April 4th through the 6th, 2024. And we run the workshop every 2 years, as you know. We typically open up registration in December. We'd like to try to, if we could get the program completely firmed up, open it up in November. So people can go to our website, or if they're involved in our newsletter, receive our newsletter, we'll see our social media, we'll see the dates when it opens. And I'm really excited by it. By the time you air this interview, have the entire program lined up. But we have Anna Quinlan as our opening night keynote speaker, who's going to be fabulous. I've loved her for a long, long time. Wade Rouse, who is a humorist and a novelist and very, very prolific. He was a faculty member a number of years ago, and he's become extremely popular. And he's coming to be a keynoter. Rizvi Owens, who does the podcast Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, a daily podcast, which is an amazing feat, and an author in her own right, and just kind of a media guru. Beth Lapides, who's a stand-up comic, and then we'll fill it with one other keynote slot. And then the faculty, again, come from all over. We have a couple of returning faculty members, but a lot of new people. So I think it's going to be a very strong program. We're also going to have some time in the schedule where people can go over to the University of Dayton campus, where Erma graduated, and view a professionally developed exhibit, which will open in February and I think continue through like June or something like that. And that's special. We had a preview of the last workshop with the Bombeck children there, and that's something very special for people to kind of hobnob with the family and look at their mother's work and old photos and correspondence.
That's lovely that they're so involved still.
I think that's another piece that makes our workshop different, is the involvement of Erma's family. It gives it a very personal touch. Yeah. And perhaps the other thing that makes it different than other writers' workshops is that we the workshops are very hands-on, nuts and bolts, but the keynote talks are usually pretty entertaining. I mean, you can hear laughter just throughout the whole Marriott dining room when we have our keynoters up there, and we have a very strong MC, and we kind of look at it, we're putting on a show. So we're not just putting on a writer's workshop, we're putting on a show. And with that combination of between education and entertainment, I think it's also part of the secret sauce.
I love it. I love it. The secret sauce. That's a great way of putting out what it is. So you also published an anthology called Sisters. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if you have plans to do other anthologies?
We don't have any immediate plans to do another one, but the way that one developed was a woman who I didn't know, an editor on the West Coast from the San Francisco area, Marcia Stewart, contacted me, and she said, I have an idea I'd like to discuss with you. She'd never been to our workshop, knew nothing about it, Googled humor writing, and the workshop popped up. She started reading about it. Her sister, who she was very, very close to, died like after 8 weeks after being diagnosed with lung cancer. And her sister was in a kind of a corporate communication job, had planned to retire somewhat soon, move out to the West Coast, wanted to take these writing classes, workshops, wanted to get involved, had done some humor writing, kind of hilarious letters to the family, that sort of thing. And so she wanted a way to honor her sister. And we just batted around a number of ideas, and we kind of came up with this, well, why don't we do a book on sisters and open it up and have a contest? Her sister's name was Nikki, so we named it the Nikki's Prize for Humor Writing, and we opened a contest up, and I think we had almost 300 entrants from around the country and in several other countries as well. And I had some judges who picked the best ones, and we put them in the book. And then we found, and this was where Marcia really came, my co-editor came in, was so handy and helpful in this regard, was looking for ways that we can reprint some pieces from famous people. And then, of course, we reached out to some of the workshop former keynoters and said, hey, can we reprint this piece of yours? Like Alan Zweibel wrote a little piece about his sister. That was beautiful. Kelly Corrigan, who's not been to the workshop, but she said, yeah, you can reprint this piece. So people just saw what we were doing. The fact that any money raised from that book would go right back into the endowment for the workshop, and stepped up and helped us. And it was, and we published it on our own. We went through Amazon, learned a lot about publishing, self-publishing. We run workshops on it, but then when you actually do it, you find out, wow, there's a lot to this. So,
you had to get your own ISBN number and
the Library of Congress, that the whole bit.
Yeah.
But we also, and I think that it captured the spirit of the workshop in this way, is that we tell people you can write, and then we give them an opportunity to do it. And many of these people, many of the contributors, not all, had never had a piece published in a book before. And so it was a very special moment, I think. And we all felt this sense of ownership when this book came out. And I feel very proud of it. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's really quite good.
That's wonderful. So you're a journalist, but you're not a humor writer per se yourself, but
Right.
you've been so ensconced in this that I am sure you have a number of humor writing tips that you can share based on all the experience you have with all the humor writers who
I'm
write.
going to share a couple of things that I think Irma might say,
I love
um,
that.
which would be, and I think anyone would say this: be yourself. No matter if you're writing humor or a personal essay or whatever, you've got to draw on you and not try to be the next Irma or try to be the next Sedaris. You have to be you. And then I think she was a master of exaggeration. She took, these family foibles, little things that probably happen in their lives, and just found the humor in them, and that sense of exaggeration that people could still identify with. I think is very strong for a humor writer. And then I think she just found the funny in the ordinary. And you just have to look at life's little moments. So many things are just kind of hysterical when you think about them. It's like the little things that your kids would say when there little. You kind of wish you had written all that down, because they say things that, wow, you wouldn't even have thought of, that are really quite funny and amusing, and just from their own perspective. So kind of looking at life from a different perspective and finding the humor in it.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And it's kind of how the mom bloggers started, right? They would
Exactly.
write down what the kids said and they would
Exactly.
say it. And then when it became parenting writing, you had to kind of add a different spin on it. So when I was
Sure.
writing my pieces for the New York Times or the Washington Post, it became much more of framing it around my own experience, which I talk a lot about in the book, but then adding in the tips and the expert advice and all the
Yes.
information. But it's really interesting because you do start with those moments or those words or those
Right.
feelings. So where can people find you? Where online for both Irma and yourself?
Well, my website is very simple. It's my name, teririzvi.com, TeriRizvi.com. And then the Irma website is part of the University of Dayton's website, which is go.udayton.edu/Irma.
Got it. And we'll put everything in the show notes.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah. And I also want to mention, because you mentioned Zibby, Zibby was on Freelance Writing Direct, and I've known
Yes, I
her
know
for a
that.
number
I
of
know that.
years. Yeah.
I
I'm
think she's
actually
going to
going to
be
be in a panel with her for a podcasting conference called PodFest in
excellent.
January.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent.
So this is everything is very synchronistic in
It
the
really
publishing
is. I
world.
mean, all the Irma stars align.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Teri.
Thank you so much, Estelle. It was a pleasure talking to you.